Hey, so my final patch notes rundown for 10.08, and it's basically the 5th anniversary for Valorant, so damn, I'm old. And we're getting episode 1 music back for like the menus, character select, and victory and defeat. So when you get a defeat, it feels a bit more nostalgic, I guess. Gifting now available. So this is pretty good. It's been in the league for a long time now. And you can only do the bundles and the individual items from those bundles. But imagine later on down the line, they'll allow you to like look at other people's rotations and buy the stuff in their rotations for them. That might work as well eventually down the line. I imagine that might be added. But I don't imagine anything to do with like gifting people from your rotation will ever happen. Because that just basically means like 10 billion accounts just like buying for like your main, which is probably not ideal for Riot to incentivize. Next is like the agent updates, and we'll start with Brimstone. And basically, this is just a audio update to make it easier to hear his Molly in smokes. And honestly, I've died to this a couple times because I'm stupid mainly. But yeah, it's just nice to actually have this. To be honest, it's fine. It doesn't really matter too much. Next is Astra, and this is so basically it's most non-ultimate concusses are 3.5 seconds, so they're gonna just normalize it basically. Normalize the Nova Pulse stun duration from 4 seconds to 3.5, and honestly it's pretty meaningless overall. I think because it's a stun, it means a tiny bit less when you load durations like this, especially because it's also quite a long stun, like 4 seconds to 3.5. Like 3.5 is a default stun duration, is also quite long anyway. I think it just matters a tiny bit less than if this was like a flash, or if this was like the suck or something. This would matter more. Probably the hardest stun to land in the game. I can't think of a harder stun to land. Tail at long range is like maybe harder, maybe, because you have to have a lineup, you have to have a nice base angle, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, like over certain ranges, like that one's gonna be hard. Neon's gonna be hard as well sometimes over certain ranges, or like if you don't want to stun your teammate as well or something. Like there are situations where the other ones can be sometimes harder, and this one you can just place on areas and like lock it off essentially. It's like area denial, so this isn't really that important to the actual ability itself, in my opinion. But I do think that if you do get it off, you maybe could be rewarded a bit more than 3.5 seconds. But I don't know. I think this is fine. I don't think it matters a whole lot, regardless of my yapping. So next is Yoru, and Yoru is probably the strongest agent in the game. He definitely is lined up for a nerf, and I think this makes sense. I think this is actually quite tame as well overall for like all the things they could do. It's mainly just aiming at the dimensional drift being very, very strong. And I think this is like a combination of they want to hit it mainly in pro play, but then they've also had a bit of they've hit it a tiny bit in solo queue as well here as well. A tiny bit. So first of all, the dimensional drift duration, try to say that 3 times fast, reduced 12 seconds to 10 seconds. So it means very little for solo queue, but it means a lot more for pro play, because in pro play they tend to be good at like getting all the value out of abilities like this over the full span of the 12 seconds, where in solo queue we tend to not really use it in that way. Like you can use it to get the full value out of the 10 seconds by like getting to a certain position in like the enemy's flank, or getting as much information you can at those 10 seconds, but usually you're going to also be doing very solo queue selfish-esque plays, which you're going to be like finding the first enemy you can see in like a really good position to then pop out and shotgun them. That is also happening a lot so in solo queue. So, and other variants of that where you're just very you're very much wanting to find a fight out of it rather than actually getting like information from it. So yeah, this is just very much aimed at pro play. The next one is dimensional drift point cost from 7 to 8, and there's some interesting things to talk about with point cost stuff. In like a very simple level, this impacts the amount of times that you can get a dimensional drift off in a half, right? It also means in pro play that you won't really farm this ult as efficiently, right? Because you need an extra orb to do it. So it won't be farmed as well, or like pro teams are generally better than solo queue teams at knowing what ults they want to farm and get the orbs on the right people for that farming. Not just the orbs on the ground either, like who to send in and like bonus rounds to go fight, so then they get the orb from maybe a kill and a death and a trade. Pro teams tend to be very good at doing that kind of stuff, right? So something else I also wanted to touch on was the difference between making a big play with an ult and a small play with an ult. If we look at it in like an orb economy type way, essentially when you have like a big ult, it tends to be better for your orb economy because you've used one ult to essentially attain higher amount of orbs, right? So if we look at it for like Yoru's ult perspective, right? if we use his ult to gain like 3 orbs, because we found like 3 people on site or 3 people in like corners we can punish and that kind of stuff, right? Then it would gain back 3 orbs from the 8 cost, right? Especially if Yoru gets those kills himself, it's a lot more direct. But sometimes it's going to be dispersed across other agents as well. But if you look at it on like a more individual standpoint, if you make a smaller play, so if you go and make that shotgun play out the ult, then you're going to get like one orb back, right? And so when you increase the cost, you're essentially getting less from each orb, right? If we break it down into a fraction, right? 1/7 is more than 1/8, and that's essentially what an orb is worth now for Yoru, right? It goes from 1/7 to 1/8, and 1/7 is a bigger amount of the ult than 1/8 is. And essentially what this means is that the lower rewarded ults will just get rewarded even less than they are now, and the higher level, like more rewarding ults, will be more incentivized to do. Not necessarily getting stronger, but they're more incentivized to do. So this is actually more of a incentive for him being used at pro play rather than in solo queue, because in solo queue you'll get slightly less rewarded for the like the single like plays you'll get from Yoru. And I think this isn't just like a Yoru only thing with ult cost, because this does happen sometimes with other ults. Whenever an ult like increases or decreases in cost, this always happens where there will be more incentive to either make a bigger plays with it or to make smaller plays with it. And this is one of those times where you want to be trying to make more bigger plays with his ult, and this may incentivize him more to be played as like a initiator type of role. Even though he has like good opportunities with the operator and to entry as well, and that kind of stuff. But he does have like the initiator like flavors in him, and I think this is one of those things where they're trying to pull him away a bit from the solo queue-esque plays, which is not great, I think. So I do think the solo queue stuff has got marginally weaker with this, because you can't snowball as much with the ult orbs. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, and hopefully I edited most of the yapping out, because honestly there was crazy amounts of yap. So hopefully it was comprehensible, and most of the yap is gone. So next is bug fixes, and I think I did quickly have a quick like scan through the bug fixes, and there's 2 main ones I think that are like actually matter that I've encountered before. They may actually matter in other ones that I just haven't seen. But the ones that matter are the fix an issue where Deadlock's barrier could be used to boost players. As far as I know, for like a lot of Deadlock players, they would use this for like in solo queue to boost on boxes and do crazy things. And this being gone essentially takes away some of the skill from Deadlock a tiny bit. But obviously if it wasn't intended, then it kind of has to get fixed, I guess. It also does differentiate the barrier mesh from Sage Wall a bit more, which is something that I think that I will actually talk about in a future video, probably one of the more recent future videos as well, like it'll be out like next week or maybe this week. And I do touch on like agent identity and how like Valorant kind of like to preserve it. And this is one of those changes, I think, where they're trying to preserve more of a hard line between barrier mesh and Sage Wall. Even though they do already function fairly differently. And the other one is on, am I blind? Is Yoru, sorry. Reverted a bug fix that caused Yoru's clone to slightly mismatch normal player movement when running into walls. I saw this one, and I thought it was quite funny because I realized that the Yoru clone does like a weird stutter step sometimes when it goes into walls. And that it just doesn't match what Yoru actually looks like when he's walking into walls. So yeah, you can like tell. Obviously, it's not a very big change, to be fair, because it probably doesn't happen that much. Like in terms of like the actual reward of this is when the Yoru fake clones and then walks into walls, because then you can actually see the difference between the 2 players. But I guess actually, to be fair, you can also tell for sure that the Yoru clone isn't Yoru as well, I guess, which kind of makes it less valuable when it runs into walls. It's probably pretty minor overall, but it is gone now, which is nice. So yeah, that's it for all the updates on this actual patch notes. But I want to talk about something else, which is the celebrating 5 years of Valorant video, which went out on the Valorant channel, on the official Valorant channel. I'm going to talk about a very small clip, literally like a 2-second clip. So this 2-second clip, and I just want to focus on the subtitles, right? I mean, we are really hoping to get a version of replays out to you around Champs time. So basically, it means that this year we should have some sort of replay system. And I have opinions on the replay system. because I actually think that majority of the player base that actually want this replay system won't actually use it. They're gonna, like, for the most part, I'm just trying to think, like, comparing this to CS or CS2 or whatever, CSGO, and Valorant, right? Comparing the two, I imagine that if you look at CS, the majority of their player base is not using the replay system. They're using it for, like, maybe like content creation, like me. For instance, I could use it for thumbnailing, I could use it for editing certain things, I could use it for like montage stuff if I wanted to, that kind of stuff. And also the other people that are probably using it are more like pro, or they're either pro at like high levels and VOD reviewing like actual games, like esports type games, like pro games, or they're going to be using it for improvement, right? And that's going to be a minority of people. All those people, maybe not so much the content creator ones, but for the most part, it's going to be a minority of people that are going to be using the replay system, right? I don't imagine over 10% of the community is going to be using a replay system. Maybe when it first drops, a lot of people are going to be using it, but over time, it's going to dwindle. And then I think on average, it's going to be around 10% of the community that's actually going to be using a replay system. Because a lot of people just don't care enough, or they care more about wanting to play the game than to review themselves. I think that for the most part, this replay system is over-asked for, relative to actually how many people are going to use it. I also have opinions on things like the replay system can make the game feel more figured out, but that also is like a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, where when the game feels very figured out, sometimes new strategies can surprise people out of nowhere, and it makes room for being more innovative. Well, it makes less room for being more innovative, but it makes it smarter when you are innovative, or you can actually find or more powerful when you're more innovative, where you can like find these angles that no one really found, and find a way to like counter the meta. I think it makes it more skillful when everyone has a replay system, and then you're able to find ways through that replay, through the meta, or through the stuff that's all figured out. But yeah, a replay system is basically all about trying to figure out the game more. So yeah, I'm not 100% sold that this is like a good thing, 100%. So yeah, the concern with the replay system is that it's going to make stuff stale because everyone's going to be so figured out with everything. But I think that first of all, that will take time, and second of all, it's not like we haven't had stale metas before in this game. So the replay system adding to that, it might be too much, but at the same time, it's just going to be a change. At least at the start, it's going to be a change that's going to make sense, and it's going to make the game more fun. It's just that over time, it might take away. And so we'll just have to see what happens. Something else I also forgot to mention is that it may give teams more opportunities to subvert the meta in ways that they've seen things be played out by other teams. So in their prep, they can create something new and like cook something up that's specifically good versus what they've seen. On the flip side, that also does mean that they will get figured out by the replay system as well. So it may create a really healthy back and forth between teams anti-stratting, more so than what we see now at least, and especially in a more noticeable way. Yeah, so with both teams like figuring things out about each other, it might make games like super interesting because both teams have kind of figured out what both teams like to do. And obviously the anti-stratting currently is fine. But it's not like perfect, right? I also think as well that lineups, like getting lineups from like pro games or just people that you've played against, you'll be able to see exactly what their lineup was, which is, good for me as a lineup nerd, I guess, but also bad for me as a lineup nerd because now, all the lineups that I use against my enemies will find them without going to my YouTube channel, which is unlucky, I guess. Okay, so that's it for my patch notes rundown. I would love to know what you guys think about the Yoru changes and the replay system. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in my next one.